Biblical Ethics 012a, Xenophobia, a biblical perspective, from the book of Genesis. Fellow South Africans, I felt compelled to deliver a message about xenophobia and how it is unequivocally wrong. What initially compelled me was what I assume is as a result of fear resulting from economic uncertainty emanating from the COVID-19 lockdown and its economic impact on us, and importantly the world. It is an increasing xenophobic trend in social media. We, as Christians, cannot allow these thoughts in ourselves, and the Bible is clear that we are all one under Christ and God. There can be no justification for xenophobia. The very first chapter and verse of the Bible in Genesis 1, verse 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, which implies ownership by God, not man. Man is merely the steward. And in verse 11 God says, "Let the earth put forth grass, herbs yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit after their kind, with its seed in itself upon the earth." And it was so. All there is comes from God and is therefore for us all. We are to share and to have a spirit of charity. God made and blesses all of creation and all of mankind. He made us all in His image. We are brothers in God. God provides. It is not for us to take away. It is our short-term fears and desires that lead to evil. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. We do not have joblessness because of foreigners in our land. We have joblessness for many reasons. I'm not an economist, but we have missed many opportunities to uplift this country economically through appropriate quality education and health. Despite many successes on these fronts, we have mismanaged these two important areas through a lack of vision and a lack of implementation. Other countries have responded to the new economies and the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution and are creating jobs and wealth for their citizens and their country. India and China are but two examples. God will always provide for us somehow. Cain kills Abel out of envy. I remind you of the 10th commandment, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods." Genesis chapter 4 verse 9. And Yahweh said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" And he said, "I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?" And God said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries to me from the ground." We must always take responsibility for all our brothers and not turn a blind eye or pretend we don't see them. When we kill through greed and or in its many forms, we will be held to account. Remember that we are all a likeness of God and should therefore treat each other accordingly. Genesis 9 verse 6 says, "Whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man." Here again, the divine sanctity of mankind is re-emphasized. Also, it speaks of shedding blood, harming your fellow man. Genesis 11 verse 6 says, "And Yahweh said, Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. And now nothing will be withheld from them which they purpose to do." We are referring here to the Tower of Babel. While God appears to disapprove, He gave us many different languages so that we could not collaborate together. There is also acknowledgement that when peoples of the earth work together for the common good, nothing is impossible for them. Derivatively, if we do what is good in the sight of the Lord, nothing is impossible. I urge you now to take a moment and think. Consider your blessings and write them down right now. Pause the video where you can reflect on your blessings and then add to these regularly. So consider your blessings now and write them down somewhere where you can reflect on them and add to them regularly. A diary, a journal, a book. This may keep you from envy. Give God thanks for all His blessings and pray that you'll always be grateful for them. Why do I urge you to do this? Because it makes you grateful. It gives you a spirit of charity, and when you feel like you've been blessed by God, then you will not be upset when God blesses others, hopefully. Genesis 12 verse 10. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Genesis 12 verse 10. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. God may test your faith. Following God and being obedient to Him does not give us immunity to the hardships of this planet and the life it offers. Be of a generous spirit. Genesis 14 verse 14. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, and pursued as far as Dan. When your brother is in trouble, help him immediately. Do not think what you can gain from another's troubles. When God helps you to bless others, do not expect to accept anything in return from the others. God is our reward, not earthly things. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all these other things will be added to you. We must not only do for ourselves, but also for those in our care and proximity. God can bless you no matter your situation. God will bless us in proportion to our faith and obedience. If we are faithful in little, we will be trusted with much. But if we are not faithful in little, how can we be trusted with much? Ask God to bless your steps, your way. Obviously, this is more likely if you are walking in the way of God. Do not desire that which is not for you, but rather be content with what you have or are given. Rather desire that which you need rather than that what you want. We always, by our human nature, love that which we want more than that which we need. Genesis 36 verse 6 says, And Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters and all the souls of his house and his cattle and all his animals and all his possessions which he had gathered in the land of Canaan, and went into a land away from his brother Jacob. When there is too much competition, gracefully, at the will of God, move away and God will provide. How do we feel about South Africans that have immigrated or work abroad outside of South Africa? Do we see them as taking away jobs from those locals? If so, should they also be recalled? Some of these very South Africans working overseas may be providing for families locally. Must Trevor Noah come home and they leave American jobs for Americans? Genesis 37 verse 4. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than the rest of his brothers, and they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Jealousy and covetousness are like seeds that grow and grow and grow. And that is why the 10th commandment forbids this thought process. Envy, like a weed, should be rooted out at the source. Not the source of the envy, but envy itself. Genesis 37 verse 18. And they saw him afar off, and before they came near to him, they conspired against him to kill him. This is now Joseph and his brothers. Shared envy is all the more negatively powerful if instead they had rooted out the thought at its source. In Genesis 37 verse 28, And they passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph into Egypt. So Joseph is now in a foreign land. Right? Jesus was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. For what price are we willing to betray somebody? What is our personal price? A job or job reservation? Is this our 20 or 30 pieces of silver for which Judas sold his soul? Hatred through fear will always find somebody or some group to fear and hate. If there are no foreigners in our country, then we may fear and hate along political or tribal lines. If there are no other tribes, then we will fear those in the next village. And when there are no more next villagers, then the next hut. And when there's no more next hut, then our very own brother. Jesus gave us only 2 commandments in Matthew 22 verses 35 to 40 and Mark chapter 12 verses 28 to 34 and Luke 10 verse 27. Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Christians, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. on these 2 commandments, saying all the law and the prophets. Jesus gave us only 2 commandments. And when we engage in xenophobia, we are already falling foul of just one of the 2. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Genesis 39 verse 4 says, and Joseph found favor in his sight, and he ministered to him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. So, yeah, Joseph is in a foreign land and is being blessed. By who? By God. So when you see foreigners and they have more than you, bear in mind that it is God that may have blessed them. God is already working for good in Joseph's bad circumstances. So then, are they really bad circumstances, or are they rather difficult circumstances? Joseph was a foreigner in Egypt and God blessed him. Do not be envious, because God will bless whom he will bless, and he will curse whom he will curse. Sufficient is your grace, your blessings. When God blesses his servants, the devil will always come and try to take away that blessing. Are you the devil's agent? Genesis 41 verse 8. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream. So Pharaoh had a dream, and he now calls Joseph to come and interpret his dream. But there was none that could interpret them to Pharaoh. Joseph, foreigner to the land, could interpret, and thus went on to play a very important life-saving role for Egypt and the Israelites, who would later have famine and were saved by the Egyptians and their stores. Why? Because there was a foreigner in the Egyptians' land who came to stay and benefited from Egypt during the famine. This is God at work in the leader of one nation to save that nation and another nation. Genesis 50 verse 20. Though you meant evil against me, yet God meant it for good. This is Joseph addressing his brothers. To bring to pass what is this day, to save many people alive. When God allows people to wrong us, we do not have to take vengeance, because, 1, God may have meant it for good to bring it to pass what is this day, to save many people alive. God says, vengeance is mine, and I am a jealous God. This may be the first in a series on xenophobia. This piece came from just one book of the Bible, Genesis. There are 73 books in the Catholic Bible. Once again, my brothers, I thank you for your time. Peace be with you. God bless you.